settle for less. It's all in your head, how you think you manifest. So get ready to rise, cause we about to be the best. Gotta switch it up, gotta break the old habits. Get your mind right, turn your dreams into habits. No negative vibes, only positive thoughts.
What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Mindset Cafe podcast. It is your boy Devan, and we are joined today, and I am honored to have him on the podcast. Marty Strong. He is a retired Navy SEAL officer and combat veteran. He is a CEO and a best-selling author as well. He has had an extraordinary journey, and you guys already know on the Mindset Cafe, we're all about learning from other people's journeys and their stories and helping us condense our timeline to success. So without giving too much away from his journey, letting him dive into it, Marty, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thanks for having me, Devan.
So let's dive straight in. I mean, the one that really stuck out and everything was obviously probably the Navy SEALs, and I'm sure you've talked about it a bunch, but what inspired you to join the military or to the Navy?
Well, I joined the Navy to get ready from Nebraska. So
Okay.
I was 16 years old. Parents were divorced. I had a alcoholic mom with a lot of mental issues. So I was able to forge her signature on the early enlistment documents that the recruiter gave me, and got into what's called the early entry program. So you can sign up to a year before you actually show up in boot camp. So I locked that in when I was still 16. So I had my
Wow.
escape route all ready to go. And then joined the Navy. Right after my 17th birthday, went straight into boot camp, came out of boot camp, and went into a training program in the Navy. They call them A schools. They're for your primary job or function in the Navy. And mine was radar and air traffic control. So I did that for about 17 weeks and did real well. Graduated top of my class. I got meritoriously promoted, and I got to pick my orders to where I wanted to go out of the available ships. And I picked one in the Mediterranean. And they gave me my orders on a Friday, and they said, here you go. And they read out the orders, and they said to report to underwater demolition SEAL training, Coronado, California. And it's a Friday afternoon. There's a snowstorm going on, and I've got tickets, airline tickets from Chicago to San Diego, but not to where I'm supposed to be going. And I called my dad up at the airport, and he says, well, that's what they call them orders, son. So get there and find somebody, and they'll figure it all out. And what happened was I got there and I found somebody, and he talked me into volunteering for the SEALs. So that's how I got into it.
That's awesome. I mean, that's a crazy story. I mean, it's so cool to meet people that are, veterans and have transitioned into the business world, becoming entrepreneurs and authors and stuff. I mean, more so, some of the other names that, from that I've got to read and learn a little bit of their stories, the famous ones of David Goggins and, Jocko Willings and stuff, but there's so many more that are coming out now and that are telling their story. Right. And that's the cool thing, is like getting to hear the stories and how it adapts into business and some of the things that you learn from the different branches of the military, but the mindset that you can transition over into business and into life and into your own personal development. Right. What was that transition point for you from the SEALs to, realizing that you wanted to get into the entrepreneurial space? Or was there a time in between, after basically retiring from service?
There wasn't any time in between. I had, my back was messed up from a parachute accident. I was coming up on my 20th year. You can retire starting on your 20th anniversary. And so I figured out, I'm going to get out. I'm going to go to law school, become a lawyer. And then at the last second, I decided, no, I'm going to go interview with a bunch of financial services firms. And I got picked up to do that. So when I retired, I went straight into the money management business. And I had an undergraduate and a graduate degree in business, so I knew a little bit about it, but what I didn't know is I didn't know how to sell. And I didn't realize I had to go out and find my own clients. I had to convince people to open accounts with me and give me their life savings or the proceeds of their business sale or whatever it was, and to trust me, and it wasn't really so much about being being or acting smart or having all the right answers, or it wasn't about math. It was about, do people trust you when they look at you and they speak to you? They feel like you're going to take care of them and take care of their, their well, and sometimes very difficultly earned nest egg. So I didn't know that going into it, but anybody that's been in the military has been taught to lead, and for the most part, they've been taught to lead in a crisis situation. And when I say train, I mean, you do lots and lots of exercises and training where the training staff comes up and they hypothetically kill the person in charge, and the next person has to step up and keep doing the job. And that's become so much a part of the way you're raised in the military, especially in the special forces, special operations community, that it's just second nature that if somebody's stumbling, you're going to help them out. If somebody in charge needs help, you're going to step up and say, "What can I do for you?" So you're a really good follower because you've had to play the role of leader. And you know how important it is to be a good follower. And that kind of melding of follower leader, off and on focusing during crisis and failure, it kind of turns you into somebody who's willing to kind of roll with the situation and be helpful or be um, a competent leader, whatever is required at the time. And when people are looking at the markets and they're afraid of what's going to happen to their money, they get very emotional. And it turned out, again, I didn't anticipate this, that what they really needed was they needed leadership. They needed somebody to look at them square in the eyes and say, "You've got a good plan. We've got a really good plan set up. It's a multi-year plan. Take a deep breath and mean
No,
it." I mean,
yeah,
somebody been in much worse situations, life and death, and uh, and so this wasn't really life and death. This is just, it's the markets, but in their mind, it was life and death. So that's very comforting for them to see somebody who's been in the military and been through that kind of stress and have that poise in the moment when everybody else is kind of losing their heads. And that was something I never anticipated having, any value. I thought that was just related to the military experience, but it actually transferred over both when I managed money, but also when I started leading companies later on.
no, I think that's so awesome. And I mean, I'm sure your emotional intelligence in the military, it definitely gets tested, right? And it's one of those things where that's one of the reasons why you can handle things that are high pressure and not have such an emotional response to it, because it's just like, okay, what do we need to do? You take, leadership and you keep it going. But one parallel that I just noticed or just thought of when you were saying that is there's a leader, and when you got replaced, like if you have to replace the leader, it's how well the military has created basically systems and processes for that position, right? If something happens, like the next person can take that role and take charge, because they already know to a degree the things that need to be done, how they need to be done. And that can transition really well into business, understanding that you have to create systems and processes that are simple enough that the next person can step into it, maybe not knowing every, cross T and every dotted I, but they can run that efficiently under the time being. Does that make sense?
It does. I think there's one other thing beyond the systems and processes piece, which should be accessible. People can kind of look at that and everything, but the the thing that the military focuses on that the commercial markets really don't is what they call commander's intent. Another way of looking at it, what's the mission purpose? What's the mission focus? A lot of leaders don't even have a good idea what that is. So that's a problem if you're the leader and you're not really sure where you're going with all this. You're basically just trying to make it to the next end of next week, and you're only being asked to explain what happened last week. So you get a very short-sighted view of the universe and of your business and of your market. You don't see competitors coming at you because you're too busy looking at the tips of your toes all the time. But if you're going to emulate what the military does and transfer it over to the civilian commercial world, you have to teach everybody and explain to everybody, communicate to everybody what the higher purpose is of the organization. They all have to understand what the intent is. So in the commander's intent in the military sense is more than just stepping up to be the leader. It's to step up to be the leader, to take the unit to finish the job that the unit was heading towards in the first place, because it was a serious or critical requirement. Easiest way to say it is there's a machine gun on a hill. That hill has to be taken so that units on the left and right can move forward. Your squad's been given the task to take that machine gun. If you don't take the machine gun, everybody else can't do anything. That's the commander's intent. Take the machine gun on that hill so everybody else can move forward. And everybody all the way down to the private is told this. That means everybody all the way down to the private can basically complete the job, complete the mission until that machine gun's taken out. And that's why when you look at Valor Awards and all the different wars, in the United States history anyway, it's very frequently the very junior people that are getting these awards. It's not the commanders and the people in high places. It's all these young guys that are not medics, but they're saving all these lives in the middle of a battle. They're grabbing people and they're fixing them and they're patching them up and they're towing them back and they're getting shot while they're doing it. And they're just a private. They're not a medic, but they just saved 5 or 6 people, which is you think is the medic's job, right? Mm-hmm. Or they weren't told to do it and they did it because they knew that was the right thing to do and it had to be done. But when you think that the leader's supposed to be telling everybody, you go get him, and be very directive, that's not the case. So normally what happens is everybody steps up and does what they have to do in the moment. And it doesn't really matter what your rank is, your tenure, your positional authority. As long as you know what the job is and what has to be accomplished, it gets done. Hard thing to convey in a commercial organization because everybody kind of has more of a self-focus. Mm-hmm. How am I going to do professionally? How am I going to do in this organization? And the worst case is where they're thinking, if I help Susie over there, Susie might look good in advance before I do. And maybe, I'll make Susie look good, but then I'll look bad because of that. And so there's all that kind of stuff going on in people's heads, which is, kind of different from knowing the processes in the football place, so to speak.
No, that makes a lot of sense though. Is that something that you kind of talk about in your book, Be Nimble? I know it's about, how to create a creative like Navy SEAL mindset, and that's how you win on the battlefield and in business. Is those some of the topics that you're going over and some strategies you go over in that book?
Yeah, all 3 of my business books, Be Nimble, Be Visionary, and the one that just came out this month, Be Different, they all talk to this, I guess, responsibility, personal and professional responsibility to learn everything you can about your job, but also about everybody else's job, and to learn everything you can about the purpose and the intention of the organization that you're a part of. And to see that as really what you're doing, and that's the purpose of being there. And the other thing that kind of helps with that, in Be Visionary, I talk about strategy a lot, strategy development. Well, if you think about what I said earlier, if you're just looking at the tip of your toes and trying to live to the end of this week, you're not thinking strategically at all. You'll never lift your head up until the train smacks you right square in the face. So you're always running a risk by not thinking big picture and thinking down the road. So if you know what you want to be as an individual, as a professional, or you know what your organization should be or you want it to be, then you have to look out there and you have a little bit more flexibility now on how you're going to do it. Because you know why you're going to do it. You know what the what is at the other end of the rainbow, so to speak. And that gives you flexibility. So if, as a metaphor or comparison, if you were trying to get to a store and you had to get some medicine for your sick mother, and if you didn't get the medicine within a certain amount of time, she was going to get a lot worse. And you start to go to the store the normal way and there's a car accident. Do you quit? Do you come back and say, sorry, Mom, it's the way it goes? No, if you can't back up, find another way around, which is another course of action, you eventually may get out of the car and start jogging towards the store. Or you call an Uber, or you wave somebody down and say, my mom's sick, I got to get to the store. You come up with anything and everything possible as a mechanical way to accomplish your task, to reach your objective and get it done. That's a mindset that is a military mission-focused mindset. It's a mindset that's related to that commander's intent concept that I mentioned.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Now, something you mentioned earlier too, with that strategic, I guess more team focused versus individual focused from the military versus the business world. How would you suggest a CEO or a business owner start trying to lead their team in a way that they can cultivate essentially a community similar to the military, where it's basically mission based or project based, driven versus, you know, individuals just kind of looking out for themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's. I tell you what, I've been in commercial business for a long time, and even though I had a little bit of a leg up as far as the position I was in at the beginning, I was more in charge of a division as a VP, director than a VP. Eventually, I got a subsidiary company, but it was within a bigger company. So I started seeing all the things everybody reads about and sees in movies, you know, the power plays and the personalities, and every so often you see that bright light, that person that was doing everything for the right reasons. And you wanted to learn from them and you wanted to be close to that person because that felt like that was truth. And everything else seemed like everybody was just kind of in it for themselves. So I lived through all that kind of crucible of emotions and concerned about self-preservation, et cetera. But I think what's missing is that, and this is going to be difficult for anybody to emulate from the military, especially in special operations. They screen everybody in the basic course. So for SEALs, it's called Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, or BUDS, in California. The Green Berets have a thing called the Qualification Course, or Q Course. The MARSOC Marines have one. The Army Rangers have one. Everybody that's special, the British SAS, Australian SAS, they have a selection phase. And we don't do that in the commercial world, right? I mean, you don't have a 5 or 6 or 7 week period where you're putting them through all kinds of paces, like staying up all night, working through the weekends, living off half a pizza, you know, running from job to job, jumping into project teams, you know, and operating with very little sleep and with deadlines, and all of a sudden running out of money or running out of resources and trying to figure out how the heck we're going to do this. Having the space that you're in, you know, kind of close down on you because you don't have enough money to stay there anymore. So you got to find a new place to move everything into. All that would be the way you would do it. You would have like this, more than a boot camp, like a selection course for people that want to be in business, want to be entrepreneurs for sure. And you'd get through all this, and not everybody would make it, but the ones that got through that would be ready and prepared to live in that world and to thrive in that world, not just survive in that world. Now, that's never going to happen. So what we end up with is life. So you start off. You said something earlier about the emotional intelligence and all that. You don't really have that until you get it. So you have to your emotional, give one input, something happens to you the first time. Human beings are human beings. You're going to be emotional. You're going to overreact. You're going to underreact, and you're going to interact with other people that realize you're overreacting, and all that's going to happen. And then you're going to have either somebody tell you what you did and kind of talk you down and explain a better way to handle it, or you'll do it a couple more times and then start to realize this. I look like an idiot running around like this. And then you eventually get to a point where you don't react that way to that input. So if you're a Navy SEAL and your 2-year-old, you know, falls and hits their head, that's a new input. You know, you don't act like a Navy SEAL. You act like a dad scared that his kid's hurt, and it has to do with their head. So you're going to react emotionally. Now, I hope you don't have to go through like all your kids hitting the floor until you finally can handle that one. But you see what I mean? Every input is going to have an initial raw reaction. And over time, you will start to get better and better and better at not so much controlling the emotions, but the moment of being emotional is very quick instead of lasting a long time. And this is taught in combat leadership, and it can be taught to leaders in business. But the way you do it is you have to run them through that kind of survival test phase. And what you can do is you set them up in a room and you start running through scenario role playing. You give them obviously hypothetical disasters, things that have fallen apart. You've lost your top salesperson. You lost your number one supplier. You lost your number one client. And you give them 20 minutes to figure out how they're going to save the company, and you walk out. And you come back in. And they don't have to be leaders to have this training. They're like, what are we going to do? You know, so you have to list all the actions on the board of what you're going to do, and then prioritize them, and then break them up and put names to them. So you've gone through everything by brainstorming. You put a pecking order to that brainstorming session, and then you assign leads to take chunks of that stuff in the time allotted, and then time's over, and you walk in and you say, so what'd you come up with? And what happens is everybody's emotions get fired up. Everybody realizes the time is crunching. If you really want to jack it up, give them 2 hours and then walk in at about 55 minutes and say that we're only going to give you 10 more minutes and walk out again. Because if they think they're going to pace themselves, that's not the way real life works. You don't get to pace your way through the crisis. The crisis happens on its own timeline, right? So that starts to get them used to they're not going to be in control of the time, and the pace of events or the criticality or the consequences of the events. All right, so once you get past it, I'm not in charge of the universe. I can't control everything. Emotional learning curve, and all these things. What they do is they build up psychological resilience. That's
Mhm.
what it really is. You're used to a particular kind of thing happening, and you're calm in the moment. You're emotional for half a second, then you're calm, then you start problem solving. And everybody watching you goes, they're so mature, they're so calm, their judgment is so sound. Look how wise they are. Well, that's because you haven't seen the all the other years of them reacting to this and not doing it so well. So that's the way you do it. It just takes a little bit of practice and training.
No, it definitely makes sense. Now, with the scenario that you're giving, it kind of reminded me of like trying to see how they would do not only with the time crunch, but also would you be looking for, let's say, a right answer, or do you think that a slight creative thinking approach plays a role in problem solving and in leadership?
So there's two different kinds of approaches to this exercise. One is you're trying to get them to do the exercise and participate. Most people are very reluctant. Now, my last book that this came out, Be Different, it's all about that, trying to shake people free of their complacency and ignite their creativity because they've spent an entire life with people telling them that's a dumb idea, or wait your turn, or wait until you're talking above your pay grade, or and so they just shut down. They stop raising their hand, right? So when you try to get people into a room, it takes a while to get them to actually participate. And a couple things you have to do is one is keep, if you can, keep the leaders, the natural leaders by org chart, keep them out of the room. So let the dynamic of who's going to be in charge or who's going to kind of facilitate. And it's better if they're facilitating because then they're going to dynamically use all the brain cells in the room. If they try to take charge, then they'll start to be kind of the alpha person and everybody else will start shutting up and following orders. And that's now you're only as smart as one or two people. So you have somebody in the room watching all this and you want them to get used to throwing stuff up on the board. If you came in and said, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, the next time you ever ran this thing, everybody would be concerned about being wrong. So you have to just let it happen. So that's pretty good. You guys, and what you're doing is you're looking at the process and how they put the thoughts together. And then you can do sessions like this in one day. You could have 3 or 4 of these things. And they're going to get better and evolve and come up with better, quicker, cleaner organizational responses and solutions to the problem set. If you end up with an alpha personality that does too much, one thing you can do is show everybody how that is a waste of time. 30, 40 minutes into it, the person monitoring it tells the alpha personality, you know, you're needed across town. So I've been told that you got to get out of here. And oh, by the way, I was just told there's only 30 minutes left. And then you watch what everybody's reaction is because they've been riding on that person's energy and leadership. The accountability has been on somebody else's shoulders. Now it's back on theirs because as a group they have to participate. And so you see the difference between a committee being led by somebody and a team that all feels like they have, a skin in the game. There's consequences and accountability for everybody to try to solve the problem. And these are just things you facilitate and do, and they don't require being shot at or doing lots of push-ups or anything like that. But it's psychologically, it's the same stuff we do in the SEAL teams. It's just we are doing mission challenges on the whiteboard instead of business challenges.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So where would you draw the line with, having a balance between discipline and flexibility when leading a team or, having leaderships within a team?
So I think there's a couple of things that I have my own opinions about certain words, like thought leader, mindset, discipline. And so discipline, my perspective, discipline is what other people see when you have repeatedly conducted yourself and and performed a behavior to the point where it becomes a habit. Now, for you, it's a struggle to make the time to do this repeat action, whatever it is. For me, like writing a book, I have to sit down, I have to write the book, and I have to write at least a paragraph a day. I got to get it done, got to get it done. So that's, to me, that's a behavioral challenge. And then it becomes a habit, and I don't even think about it. Other people, when they hear about it or they watch it, they think, wow, that guy's so disciplined. So discipline is kind of like everybody else's wrapper for what they're seeing you do. And what you're really seeing somebody do is making a difference in their lives, deciding to do something with purpose, changing their current behaviors, repeating it over and over again until it becomes a habit. That's really what discipline is. And your discipline may get you someplace, but then, the world may change, consequences and circumstances may change, and your perspective may change. And you may have to start a whole new path because whatever got you there is just not working anymore. It's not appropriate. So discipline isn't static, and mindset isn't static. You want to have a mindset that's flexible and nimble and agile and constantly humble so that you can absorb every bit of reality, every bit of truth that you can find, so that when you make a decision or you decide to do something, you're in the best position and best posture. You don't want it to be something where I have a mindset that, Marty Strong at age 21 as a Navy SEAL second class petty officer decided it's my mindset. Well, that would make no sense because everything changes all the time. So the mindset, again, is something that other people look and see that person must have an incredible mindset because they seem to be so consistent. That's behavior. That's behavior, just like discipline. So to me, you want to have a more free spinning mind, and you want to have a structure of creating habits out of behaviors that get you from where you are to where you want to go. And you put those two together, you can roll with the punches. You can roll with what life throws at you. You never want to get static.
No, it makes sense. So what do you think, in your own words, your own opinion, what separates a good leader from maybe the great ones?
I think the first thing is a strong sense of accountability. We have a lot of this in the news today. If somebody was being beaten on the side of the road and people, and let's say physically fit men in their 30s just kept walking by
Mm-hmm.
and didn't do anything, that's because they don't have a sense of accountability for anything in the social sphere. They only feel accountable for what's going on in their lives. You go back 60 years and somebody would have stepped up and tried to break it up, stop what was going on. Because years and years and years ago, people were taught that you're accountable socially. You
Mm-hmm.
can't walk past somebody who's in pain. You can't walk past somebody who's being hurt or being threatened. And that was just the way everybody was raised. And so it became a habit, and it became a part of you, and that accountability was there. So I think when in the military, you're trying to explain to everybody that you're accountable as the leader, even if you're not the full-time leader because you had to jump into a spot in an emergency. But once you're in that spot, from the training that it requires accountability. People that can't grasp the accountability part have a really hard time being good leaders because they're thinking more about something else than the people they're leading and the well-being of the people they're leading or the organizations they're leading. Otherwise, they'd be fully accountable. They'd say, whatever happens is on me. And if Joe is not doing well at his job because he's not getting any training or mentoring, and I'm in charge of the company, that's on me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I may not be directly in charge of Joe, but if I hear about it or learn about it, it's part of my system. It's part of my organizational culture, and I'm responsible ultimately for that. Those kinds of leaders are great leaders. They find ways to get down the road to the mission. They find the way to get to that intentional location on the horizon, and they don't drag everybody kicking and screaming. And they don't burn everybody out to get there because they're accountable for all of it. They're accountable for the state of mind of their employees, for the financial well-being of the company, for the quality of the products or services they're delivering, for the user experience of their customers and clients. So if you think about accountability that way, it's really hard to be a jerk and be a bad leader if you're that accountable. Now you may not have all the skills to be perfect at executing everything, but if you don't have that accountability gene going on, you're never going to be a great leader. That's for sure.
No, I think that's so on point. Great leaders, I would agree that they're accountable for themselves, their systems, their processes, their team, but they also, any lack or any basically weakness in that chain, they take accountability as well. I mean, they fix it and they help explain what's wrong and hold their team accountable as well. But ultimately they don't shift blame, right? They're like, that that's on me. Maybe I didn't explain it well enough to you. How can I help you succeed, right? So I think that's so awesome that you kind of went into that. I want to transition a little bit because I know you have written a bunch of books, and which I think is so cool. So what drove you to get into writing novels and business books?
I've always liked writing. I don't know why. Maybe because I read so much when I was a kid. I mean, I had nonstop books in my hands. I'd finish one, start another one. It's like a chain smoking person, I always had a book somewhere close by, and as I got older, I always had books staged everywhere. And even now, I read on an average of about 60 to 65 books a year. And
Dang.
the when you read that much, you get an appreciation. You get a love and an appreciation for the craft of writing. And because if you read that much, you see bad writing and you see good writing, you see great writing. And so because of that, when I went into the military, I was a pretty good writer in high school, and I was much better than the average enlisted person. I mean, I was a lot better than the average enlisted person. And I started out in the SEAL teams in the intelligence area, which meant reading reports and also writing reports, writing up briefings and stuff. And so I'd always be working for an officer. And the more I did it, the better I got. And the better I got, the more I was asked to do it. And I was also pretty good at drawing. My father was an artist. So back in those days, you had to draw all these things on charts freehand and topography of the target area and all that stuff. And so I got really good at communicating SEAL mission information and various options to execute the mission all through the medium of writing and the medium of art. So military writing is very stilted, very technical. There's not a whole lot of character development or any of that kind of stuff, and nothing but the facts. So, but the practice and having senior officers, even when I became an officer halfway through my 20 years, having senior officers look at all your writing and critique you and worse than any English teacher, send you back until you had it right. You got to a point where you became very good at reviewing your own work and very good at making sure that the points and the thoughts and the themes were clear and focused and kind of punched through. There's no junk around it. Fast forward, I decided that I wanted to write a novel. This is a little bit later in life when I had some more time on my hands. So I decided to write a sci-fi novel, a time travel novel. And when I finished writing that, I said, okay, I'm going to give all the proceeds of this thing, because I knew it was going to be worth millions and millions of dollars. I'm kidding. I'm going to give all the proceeds of this novel to the SEAL Veterans Foundation, to the programs they have for PTSD and traumatic brain injury. And I went to the association, said that's what I'm going to do. And they said, great. And then I wrote the second one, then I wrote the third one, then I wrote the first SEAL one, and then I wrote the third time travel one. Next thing you know, I had 4 time travel novels and 5 SEAL novels, and I finished my 10th novel about 2 months ago, and I'm shopping at the agents right now. So that's kind of how it happened, and I have a lot of fun writing novels. I really enjoy it. The business books, I started writing because I wanted to be a consultant and a paid speaker. It's kind of my next life after I've been a CEO for 15 years. So at some point, I'm going to get away from talking to HR professionals and lawyers and accountants and stuff, and I want to do that. And that's why I wrote Be Nimble, and that's why I kept kind of writing. And I do speaking, and I do consulting and mentoring and all that type of stuff. And there are more platforms to be able to achieve that. And again, I went back to kind of it's not stilted, but it wasn't free flowing like you have in a novel. And especially if it's a novel like a science fiction novel, I can have you turn around a corner, and somebody hits you with a ray gun, and you turn into an elephant. I mean, I can do anything in science fiction. So I didn't have the pressure was off. That's why I started with science fiction. I thought I'm not going to be fact checked on this, And then I wrote the first SEAL book. I thought, oh, I'm going to be fact checked on this for sure. And then I had to do all the research, which is not the fun part, but you have to do it if you're going to write about anything that's real. So yeah, that's how I ended up kind of getting into it, and I haven't stopped.
No, I mean, that's so awesome, and I commend you for that, because I mean, I think that me personally, I'm not a science fiction person. I like biographies, autobiographies, but then also like the business books. Like I read literally a textbook on psychology just because that's what I was interested in the moment. So I feel like you're gonna have those audiences from both genres. How do you feel like your response has been from both the business side and the business genre or audience, and then from like the science fiction time travel audience?
I'll tell you what, I'm really surprised and humbled at well, so I had to put this in the agent stuff I'm setting up for this 10th novel, and I've got over 600 4 and 5 star reviews on Amazon for the other 9 novels. I think I've got like 6 or 7 that are 3 stars or less. And the only one star I have is somebody thought that my first SEAL book was a nonfiction book about the SEAL teams, and was pissed off and said something like, "I thought this was nonfiction and it was a real stuff," and he gave me 1 star. So that's pretty good. I mean, I was pretty happy with that. And just the other day, I got a comment from somebody that had started reading Be Different, this third business book, and said, "I'm about 2 or 3 chapters in it. It's phenomenal." Well, I'm good for another 2 books when I hear something like that. I mean, it's good. It's I help other business people that I know that want to write books. I coach them more on the, you can do it kind of part of not they all write their own books. They have their own thing they want to write about. But the fear of failure and the feeling that nobody's going to want to hear anything I have to say. And that's the hardest hurdle. It's the hardest hurdle for anybody writing a nonfiction book. And but there's a way to write it. You don't have to write it like a textbook. You don't have to. You can write it your story. You can do it like a biography and string together, have every chapter be about you. And when you learn this lesson, learn that lesson, like we were talking about, the first time that one input came at you and you freaked out and all that, you can make that a story. You can do almost anything. And there are people out there that want to hear honest, true renditions of how people that have become successful started out, because that gives you not so much hope, but it gives you a kind of a guide to, you don't start on top of the game. You start and you do the work, and you put in the time, and you suffer failure, and you get past the failure, and you learn from it. And you get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, and more adaptable and more flexible and stronger and more humble, therefore more open, and then smarter, and then wisdom comes in. And it takes a while. You start off an apprentice, and everything you're starting off for new. It's okay. Being an apprentice is okay. Nobody's expecting anything out of you. That's the good thing.
No, that's awesome. No, I think it's so true though. You have to, what people don't realize, or at least with social media and everything, people think that entrepreneurship or starting a business is, all unicorns and rainbows, when you're going to be forged by the fire, to some degree, right? And it's like the books like that you've written, like those kind of books, I like those because what may seem like common knowledge or common sense to you because you've done it and lived it for so many years, it's not common sense to everyone. It's only common to you because you know it, right? So once you start, once someone like you writes that first book and gets over that fear of, what do I have to say, that they should already know this, or they might already know this, like I don't want to just put it down. Those are the things that, really stick out to people, because you have a different perspective on maybe a situation, maybe an obstacle they're facing in their life. And those are the ones that really become, in my opinion, the most relatable, especially into the entrepreneurial space. So I think that's so awesome that you, took that leap and got into that. even though, you can go into, all into science fiction and have fun with the ray guns and everything like that. But you're able to, also split your time, right? You can do the ones that are fun. You do the ones that are more serious, that are going to kind of align with where you want to go and pivot on your next phase of life. But, you're able to do both. And that's something that is also really unique. So I do commend you for that. That is
Well,
awesome.
thanks. Yeah, I
So,
have been alternating them now for a couple of years, which, yeah, because what happens is you get to the end of the novel writing and you're starting to get kind of this itch in the back of your brain that ideas are flying around for another, more serious book, and vice versa. You get to the end of editing third or fourth um, draft of the serious business book, and now you start getting an itch for putting the story together. And I think if I just pounded them out in a row, it would get stale and old.
and in your opinion, it would probably be starting to get repetitive, because you're stuck on the idea versus letting your mind be able to shift off of serious to fun to serious to fun and get your updated, view on a perspective or an angle on an issue, right?
Yeah.
But one thing before we kind of wrap up a little bit, I like to ask people, right? You have a legacy wall, the Marty Strong legacy wall. And on this wall, it could be any message that you want to leave for the up and coming generations. What would that message be?
Life is full of opportunities, but it's also full of failure to achieve those opportunities. Never quit. Never ever quit. Shoot for it, jump through the hoop, try it, fight for it. If you fail, dust yourself off, look around for another opportunity and attack it and do the same thing over again. And they're never going to end. You're 75 years old, you can still be doing that. There's no age attached to any of this. You don't have to have done it right out of high school, right out of college, or it's just look around and you see it. Whether it's marrying the person you just fell in love with, or taking a job you think probably doesn't make sense, but you really think that's a great challenge for you, just go for it.
No, that's awesome. Where can people connect with you and learn more about what you have going on, and definitely, get some of those books?
Yeah, it's simple. Let's go to martystrong.com. I've
Okay.
got all my speaking programs are there. There's access to all the books, hyperlinks to Amazon, etc. And martystrong.com.
Well, perfect. I'll be putting that in the show notes, guys. If you guys are listening, check out his books. Honestly, there are some cool topics. I have already looked them over, and I'm already getting me some as well. Make sure you guys share this episode with a friend, right? Leave us that 5-star review. But more importantly, Marty, thank you so much for taking the time to drop some knowledge for the audience.
Yeah, my pleasure, Devan.
No negative vibes, only positive thoughts. Just in the game of life, mindset calls the shots. Got my mind on the prize, I can't be